soon as you have.
Run any other option.
Really?
Yeah, it can be like.
Thanks for being chosen. Well, yeah, anybody with kids. Somebody said, who would you like to throw this? I'm like, I don't know.
Young girl.
I don't know, I kind of forget this.
Yeah.
It gets easier when you get to know them a little bit better. I mean, usually I will end up having to just because back in the day we had to do
Professor Dustyn Bork. Professor Bork, originally from Monroe, Michigan, is a visual artist and served as professor of art at Lyon College. He earned his Master of Fine Arts from Indiana University. Song Institute for Contemporary Art in South Korea, Manifest Gallery in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Torpedo Art Center in Alexandria, Virginia, and the Hunter Dawn Museum of Art in New Jersey, among others. Regionally, he currently has work on view at M2 Gallery in Little Rock, Justice Gallery in Hot Springs, Mixed D Gallery in Rogers, and a solo exhibition at the Wingate Center at the University of Central Arkansas. Bork has participated in artists' residencies in Argentina, Latvia, Belgium, Italy, and Bulgaria. His work was published in New American Paintings, Southern Issue, number 148. Bork is married to artist Carl Dahl, who is the executive director of the Batesville Area Arts Council and has two children, Paige and Aiden. Aiden is right there. Bork is represented by Cole Pratt Gallery in New Orleans, and more of his work can be found on his website, dustynbork.com. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bork.
Thank you, Dr. Oliveira. We have two things in common, actually. I don't know if you know this. Does anyone know? I feel like without Dr. Grafton here, he always does a quiz, right?
Both right.
Both what? Both Spraggins, that's one. Does anyone else know what we have in common? Same glasses. Our birthday's the same day. We're birthday twins. Thank you, Kasia, for the introduction. And thanks for everyone for showing up. What, are you lame? You don't have anything else going today? Is there nothing else? October 31st? I want to thank my colleagues also who have done faculty colloquiums. These are really inspiring for me to attend, so I thank those who went before me this year and those who are also going to present afterwards. And I also appreciate everyone that's here, students, faculty, staff that are all here. So thank you, I appreciate it. I'm going to talk about what I did on my sabbatical. So sabbatical, I had spring the last semester, so I was gone, as many of you know, because you got the bounce back email. Did some of you get that? Right, the out of office. Isn't that great when you're somewhere and you can put the out of office automatic response until you get all of those bouncing back, and it's kind of annoying, right? But I wanted to use that as an opportunity, though, to get that sort of time and space to be able to work in research. So if you look at what the sabbatical definition is in the Lyon College Policy Handbook, it says that sabbatical is a time away from teaching to be able to restore or to have a process of research and refreshing your practice. So restore kind of sounds like restoring your factory settings. Like for an iPhone, that could be good or that could be bad. But I really wanted to treat it as an opportunity, though, to stretch my practice. And that was part of what it says in that description as well. But if you think about sabbatical, it really isn't necessarily a break. It is your practice out there in the field of play and seeing how your work, your research, interacts with colleagues at other institutions. So this is sort of a snapshot, really, of my sabbatical here. And there's a little difference. It's sort of like what came first and then, pre-sabbatical and as a result of sabbatical. So I don't know if any of you were at the faculty exhibition last fall, so it would have been a year ago. And this was one of the last pieces that I made in the end of 2024. On the left is called Build. I like the German word build, also means picture. So it's interesting, a lot of my work plays off of architecture and construction and building, and also just like how we occupy those spaces architecturally, like the built environment. So build can be sort of a verb and a noun. Building can be a verb and a noun, same as painting can be a verb and a noun. You can talk about like the process of painting, but you can look at the finished piece. So it's sort of an action that then results in something that you can view. So it's sort of also like form and forming something. So this piece on the left is typical of the abstract work that I typically make. And this is about 36 by 30, so almost 3 feet by just shy of 3 feet. And what's interesting though for me is kind of giving an illusion to the process. So in this case, usually in a substrate for a painting, you wouldn't see the stretcher bars, you wouldn't see what's underneath or how it's built. You wouldn't see how it's constructed or what it's made of. So in this case, it kind of references building or construction because you see the support for it. And then the painting isn't complete. It's provisional. It's sort of in between. It's not finished, but it isn't also just starting. You don't just see the structure itself. So I kind of imagine this as being like a facade on a building that's falling apart. So you see part of it in progress. And architecture is kind of like us. It's always in between states. So typically in a painting, you wouldn't also see the background. So there's a void too where the background becomes the wall itself. Again, to reiterate the surface, what the support is, and how it's put together. On the right is sort of where I went during my sabbatical. It's interesting. Like it's a big change. I think sometimes as artists, we feel a pressure to stay in our lane and make an overall body of work that's cohesive. You get kind of known for it. And you usually don't kind of venture far outside of that. But I really wanted to use sabbatical as an opportunity to stretch my practice, not knowing that I would actually go very realistic or more representational. But I think they still are sort of in that same vein of being about architecture, a representation of it, and also the same kind of feelings and emotions that's evoked by a building and how we occupy space. This is one of the paintings I did. This is a series of paintings that I did. I started it in January of 2025. So first thing, right away, really new in the process of the year. I set this challenge of starting new work, but this is also our home. This is our home. And that's why it says there's no place like home. So one of the things that I'm interested in is depicting space and depicting place. And so this is just a lot more representational or realistic way of showing space. But I also chose this series, which I'll get back to a little bit too. The title of the series is Dwelling. That has kind of a play on words. So you see a lot of times there's play on words with my work, and entitling another entry point, another way of thinking about the work is the title itself. So where does this come from? Why am I interested in this? I think sort of growing up, I was exploring spaces like new construction or buildings that were abandoned. This is something I still like to do. This happens to come from Bulgaria, which I'm going to talk about my trip to Bulgaria and the residencies I did there. This one's actually not too far from here, about 45 minutes on the way to Poughkeepsie, if anyone's been there. And I did not go in, but sometimes I go into these types of spaces. And I think when I was younger, just being sort of unattended and let loose in the neighborhood and the surrounding areas, like this is the type of thing that I would go occupy and find these spaces. And sometimes they would become, we could get materials from there, my friends and I, that we could build little forts or little tree houses out of. And it's kind of also an idea that I return to visually as well in terms of research, because it goes to our shared experience. Some of what I'm interested in reading is, and I use in a way that's kind of philosophical, but also influences the work visually, is just some readings on space and place theory. This is a recent book. This one came out in 2024. This one's really great. It's a kind of an emerging field of environmental psychology, which is really interesting. It's talking about literally how the built environment influences us. There's a great quote by Winston Churchill that says, "First we shape our buildings, and then they shape us." And this is an allusion to this title, The Shaping of Us, and how we want a sort of picturesque, but it's not always the case of where we live. People sometimes are defined by the places they live in, but also can be kind of confined by them as well. And this is a book by Alan de Botton called The Architecture of Happiness, also kind of ideas about how the constructed environment influences people and how sometimes it's difficult to change some of those assumptions. And I'm also working on this idea of things that aren't quite done or provisional. Carly's looking at me kind of knowingly because this was the shed in our backyard that I've been working on for close to 2 years, turning it into my studio. It's real close though. It's almost finished. I've been saying that for about 9 months though. Some of you maybe have heard about this. It probably would have been way easier just to start from scratch. I've learned a lot doing this. The roof was about to here originally, and now it's 14 feet in the front and 12 feet in the back with a sloped roof. I did pretty much everything except for the electrical and the shingles, but everything else I've done. And it looks like it started like this in January. So this is kind of also a little time lapse of where my sabbatical kind of took me to. So this is what it looks like now, but it's also what it looked like, I think, in July. But it's cool. Everything's ready on the inside to go. Speaking of Carly, this is so I had an opportunity to go to Bulgaria to do a month-long residency in Velika Tarnovo, which was the old capital of Bulgaria. And Bulgaria is situated in the Balkan Mountains. It's sort of the eastern, gateway to the very edge of Europe. It's part of the EU, and it's near. It's on the Black Sea, and it's right next to Istanbul, Turkey. It's north of Greece. And so here's us. This is the Cathedral of Alexander Nevsky. So he was a important figure in sort of the freedom of, it's ironic, not a lot of like Russian monuments, a lot of like former Soviet monuments have been dismantled. But in this case, it's a saint that is associated with that sort of freedom, and it's the largest cathedral in the Balkans. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's very modern, though. It's in the Neo-Byzantine style, so it's one of the 10 largest Eastern Orthodox churches. 5,000 people can worship in it, and the top is gold, and the streets around it have the appearance of being gold as well. It's just a really beautiful structure. Carly went with me, so it was awesome. So we went in February. It was really cold. There was snow everywhere. And so we were there for about 2 weeks and also went to Greece. And this is in Plovdiv, which is about a 45-minute train ride from Velika Tarnovo. Beautiful place. This is old Plovdiv, and this is a Roman theater from the 1st century. And this is as in good of shape as anything that I've ever seen Roman ruin-wise anywhere in Italy or in terms of Greek ruins, like anything in Greece. It's just an amazing condition and shape. Bulgaria is they say the oldest named nation in the European Union, and it has the longest history of being kind of this uninterrupted history, even though it does have some changes over time. When I was there, I also had a chance to do a lot of research. For me, visual research is like a lot of just looking, admiring, making notes, and then going back and referring. So this is one of the artists that we happen to see their work in the Sofia National Gallery. And the director of the ITRIS residency program that I participated in is also a curator at the National Gallery. So we saw this piece on the left in person, and then I did some research online when I was there and found this piece on the right. But what was interesting about this is so he's a Bulgarian artist. He was born in the 50s and studied in Sofia, which was the National Academy of Art, like the place to study art. What's interesting though, is he went to Paris. So this kind of like harkens, like when you see this, it's like we did some similar things. I didn't know I was gonna do this, but he went to Paris on a residency and then made this piece. But it's interesting because you can see facades and doors and gateways, and he said his work was dedicated to urban decay, but the beauty in urban decay. You can see things like this in Bulgaria as well. We also, as I mentioned, had a chance to go to Greece. We went to Athens, saw the Acropolis. It's amazing. Anyone been to the Acropolis before? Just a few of us. It's amazing. You should go. You should also go to Bulgaria. It's great. There's this idea, though, that right now they're for the first time they'll have the front of the Parthenon the west side completely unscaffolded, which hasn't happened in like 50 years. So we missed that we saw scaffolding all over it. And it's interesting too, because the way that it looks was a result of ammunition being stored there and blew up in the 18th century. So it would be in better shape. And then also some people taking marbles off the side. They're now in the British Museum. You know the joke, why are the pyramids in Egypt? Have you heard that before? Because it wouldn't fit in the British Museum? That's pretty good. That's a good one. But they took all of the metape and sculptures that that would have been up here. Lord Elgin took those. I've seen them. They're in the British Museum. But also, it's interesting because when you go there, it does look like it was an explosion that was done intentionally, like it was bombed, and you realize it was an accident that this happened. But another really curious thing happened. It's really difficult for them to reconstruct this because over the course of a couple of centuries, when people would find random bits of marble and sculptures, they would take it to the Acropolis, anywhere throughout Athens. So these just random pieces that they don't know like what they should be for, but they're there. So that makes it really plus people were taking things. On the right here, we saw this in the Acropolis Museum. This was a votive offering. So that cut piece was this earlier female sculpture that was cut up and put into this wall. I like this because if you think about some of the sculptures that you would see in Greek or Roman classical era become defaced in some way or cut apart, removed. A lot of them are non-extant. They don't exist anymore. Like even the word defaced comes from a warring faction that would come and conquer and then deface the person by cutting their nose off. It comes from the Egyptian idea that the person has ka or soul or spirit that's attached to them. And if you don't have your nose, you can't breathe. So that would be a way of killing someone. So a lot of these sculptures, you'll see their noses missing. You'll see this image again on the right. It's like, how do these things influence my research? How do these things influence my teaching? You'll see them come into play. But I like this because oftentimes in the medieval era, when these became kind of worthless in a way, and they didn't have their cultural meaning anymore, they would be used in foundations of buildings. So these were things that were used earlier, relics or parts that had meaning were now used in an architectural way. So this isn't literally that, but it kind of looks like that reference there. I also like making connections like this. This is from the island Akrotiri, where the really early fresco, 16th century BCE, and this is this really well-known fresco, the spring fresco. They still have an active archaeological site there. It's one of the best preserved because a lot of times archaeological sites were like pre-archaeological understanding and scientific methods. So they just went in and said, let's just bomb it. Let's get what we can. And just like, if it looks valuable, they didn't really study the kind of story of it. But this is great because now it's kind of fallen in the same time era of knowing. But I like this, this is a fresco. This is a mural that was in, a house. And then here on the right, this is graffiti. It's like that urge to create is universal. It's timeless. And who gets to call it art? Why is it in a museum? Why is it not in a museum? Why is this like defacing? And similar kind of idea. And here in the United States, we've had an issue, somewhat contentious issue of what do you do with monuments that are no longer in favor of the people that live in that area, right? A lot of Civil War monuments that are coming down that people are like, there's debate on either side. Where should they belong? Who gets to decide what public art is in the public? This is a piece that I saw. I didn't get to see the piece on the bottom left. This only existed for a very, very brief period. But this is a street artist collective called Destructive Creation. And what they do is they go out and do these interventions in old memorials, so Soviet era memorials where they don't necessarily agree with the politics of it. And why are they still here? See what it is? It's like Ronald McDonald in there, Superman, Joker. It's a great take on these as heroes and villains, right? And below it says, right in step. That's what's written in Bulgarian. And then I did see this on the right. I was getting a tour actually of an alum from Lyon that I didn't know before, Kalina. She graduated in the late 90s. Cindy Barber put me in touch with her. And so she gave me a great tour of Sophia. And when we were touring, doing this walking tour, I said, what's that? Because I was really curious about that because it looks like a plinth that a memorial was on, but there's no sculpture there anymore. I said, was there a sculpture there? Kind of looks like maybe something like this, because I've heard a lot of these came down once people were defacing them. And she said, no, it was a mausoleum. So this is the mausoleum as it looked, and it was the first communist leader of Bulgaria that was sort of put in place by the Soviets. And this was built in 1949. His successor was buried there also in 1950. And their bodies were on display. They were tidied up every now and again, and people could go see them anytime. For like up until 1999, kids would go tour like field trips. But then it was also put up very, very quickly. So it was difficult to preserve and keep in good shape. So it became really an eyesore, but also difficult, history that people were dealing with. So they weren't sure what to do. A lot of people were upset that it still was there. So they demolished it. They buried the bodies, demolished it. The plan is to later make a socialization park. And right now it says, the demon has already been here. That's what it says in Bulgarian. It's a really interesting confluence of cultures that are here too, just kind of paint a picture of what Bulgaria is like. So you have part of the Ottoman Empire. This is Islamic mosque, which I actually had a chance to go inside. Roman ruins. So, if you think about the Byzantine Empire, Constantine's wife was from here when it was Serdica, when it wasn't Bulgaria. So he really, cherished that. So later, like Byzantine emperors also took care of this area in Bulgaria. And of course, you got McDonald's on the top left. That's also a really important monument. We didn't see many McDonald's when we were there, but when you did, it was like a very popular site. Then I went to Iatris. That was also really difficult. Carly went home. That was a challenge. Like she went home. That was sad. That was when I was also feeling there's no place like home. And then I journeyed on my own to Velika Turnova, which Velika Turnova is the old capital. And so when they were kind of going through that modernization process in the 20th century, they moved the capital from Velika Turnova to Sofia, where it is now. So that's Sofia on the left. And this is my studio that I used for a month in Velika Turnova at Iatris. And it's right on the Yantra River. Plus, it's really just cool to see your bio in Cyrillic. That's kind of neat. I like anything like that. But the very first day I was there, when I got into town, it was like their national holiday. It was one of their national holidays. And I went to a reception. There was an art exhibition. This is Ivo and his partner, and here in a collaborative together called the Theater of No. And I went to this, and they were like, go to this reception. It was at Narrativa Gallery, which is in Velika Turnova. And I was like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. They're cutting up the pieces that he created. I remember like talking to Carly afterwards. I was like, seems kind of gimmicky. I don't know. Not a big fan, but I thought about it more and more. And I was like, it's actually a really cool idea. And my work a lot of times is about destruction and creation as well. So that's Ivo. He's also a creative director on sets for films. So he's been like a filmmaker. His wife's an actress, a musician, and a writer. And so these were like the tarps they used to sort of just cover over the table and the floors, like kind of just to make sure they didn't get paint on the walls or the floor. But then he also painted back into them, and then he stretched them as canvases. So it really was his art, but I didn't know this backstory until later. I think it was Spartacus. He worked on the film, or not the film, the TV show. I think it's on Showtime, HBO. He worked on that, and these were all the, he just kept them for like a decade and was like, I'm going to do some, rolled them all up. I'm going to do something with them. And so this is what he did with them. Really, really interesting guy, really great artist. But this piece, first day that I'm there, it's kind of the spectacle, like a happening, like back from the 60s. It's like, whoa. And there was a ton of people in there too. It was a great turnout. So and the exhibition was called No Painter Equals No Painting. So again, some ideas that I'm interested in as well is like provisional painting, painting that's not finished, painting that's maybe finished and then becomes unfinished. And so on the left, it kind of starts looking like that. And then at the end of the night, because people could cut it up with whatever, he had scissors, random like kitchen knife, Swiss Army knife. You could just cut them up and take a piece with you. That's what it looked like at the end of the night. They're really large too. I think this is the finished piece. And that on the left was the unfinished piece because it didn't quite fit his idea yet. And then the second night I'm there. So they also, the host threw me a party. That was great, and met a bunch of people the very first night, right after that reception. A lot of locals. And some people became very helpful to me over my time that I spent there for a month. I met some of the owners of a local event space called TAM. I didn't know they would play such a big part, though. Evo and Jesse and the folks at TAM, which I'll tell you more about later. But I met them the first night. And this is the fortress, Saravets, the fortress, so it's a medieval era. And now there's a lot of, you can tour it, you can do a walking tour, you can go through it. Part of it's been added on, and it's been sort of, become more like Romanesque than what it originally looked like and modernized. But the second night I was there, they had this large light and sound show on the fortress. It was really cool, very interactive. Cannons went off. Some soldiers like shot machine guns. That was really scary. I didn't know what was going on, but that was really cool. And so it was like, wow, this is just like great introduction. Perfect time to be here in Veliko Turnova. And then, I came with an idea. I always have like a plan of what I'm going to do, but oftentimes things change. Like this was my studio notes that I brought with me and then took notes on what I wanted to do when I got there. I kind of wanted to have a plan, but be able to adjust that plan. And keep in mind, I had just started those dwelling paintings. I wasn't finished, I don't think, with any of them. Like the first painting like of our house that I showed and the one that's on our street. I was doing those, but none of them were finished yet. I planned to do mostly abstract work there, and I wanted to think about the people that lived there, the culture of Bulgaria, and the river, but kind of address it in an abstract way. And when we were in Greece, and then I'm here by myself, in the first few days, I'm going around and taking pictures of things that were marble or looked like marble. So one thing that's cool is like marble gets reused all the time. It's not seen as precious. There's marble everywhere there. So marble isn't as precious as we see it as a building material here. And so there would be a lot of pieces of marble. I don't actually have any in this, but that would be used in a building, reused, maybe have even an inscription on it that didn't make sense for the building anymore. It'd be painted on, painted over, there'd be graffiti on it, house paint on it. And it just became really interesting and layered. I thought I was gonna do this. But plans change. I started making some paintings in this vein. I didn't have any finished. I would normally show people. These were two failures. These are two pieces that did not turn out well. Actually, they became other pieces. I just ended up changing them. But I thought my work was gonna be maybe something like this. The one on the left was supposed to imitate the surface of a material that I would see on these walks that I was doing through Veliko Turnova, but also kind of inspired by some of those marbles. The first one that I finished that I thought was done, I remember I shared it with Carly, and she's like, it's interesting. I saw this thing today, it was like, are you your harshest critic? Like your inner voice? Like, nope, because I'm married to Carly. She's my harshest critic. No, but she's real with me, it's great. I appreciate her because she often knows what I'm trying to do and where I'm trying to go and can help me get there sort of quicker. So we bounce ideas off of each other all the time. So it's great having an artist, maybe sympathetic is too kind of a description, but who is like willing to be harsh and critical, because that thing on the left is way better than anything I showed Carly, what I thought was finished. And she's like, kind of looks like a sponge, like a neon sponge. So that's not what I was going for. It was supposed to be marble. So I really abandoned it. And I kind of felt the first week like really stuck. And then I did this on the right. I was like, maybe this, and layering. It all comes into play later with the two series that I finished, but it took some struggle. I also got some marble dust while I was there, and I thought, a lot of times my paintings are really flat and thin, so if they're an illusionistic space, you don't get lost in the texture. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I'm doing textural things to use actual texture so you can get marble dust ground down by it, and then put it into your paint, mix it into your paint. So it creates this really chalky kind of surface that's really durable. You mix it in and it's like, it looks looks gritty. It looks sort of like this surface right here. But again, those paintings that I started, they were terrible. This was probably the best one, but I reused it. I reused it in something else. Same with this one. So this one actually, but also I was looking a lot. I was looking at other artists. There was a great collection of books that was in the residency. You're encouraged to leave a book, take a book. Not really take a book, no. You weren't encouraged to take a book. You're encouraged to look at the books that were there, but also leave one of yours, like a book that you were in. And so I was looking at a lot of the artists that either had been there or were associated with IHRIS and the curator, the director of this program. And so this is one in particular, Lyon College, and his painting Something Too. So when I was looking at this, I was like, that's kind of what I'm doing, but it's in a very beautiful visual way. So it'll kind of look like the landscape, but abstracted. And to me, it looked like stones. So I was kind of interested in that. But if you look at this, look at the window, look at the texture. That's this, actually just flipped. So this becomes the window. Just imagine turning it clockwise 90 degrees. That's the window right there. So, and you can see the texture too. So it is kind of has that like marble dust feel to it. It's very textural. But what I realized is when I was going around taking photographs of Velika Turnova, when I was walking around, I was really inspired by the architecture itself, not a metaphor, not some other piece or remnant of it. It was the architecture itself. And so I started doing these. They weren't intentionally supposed to be compositions. So I was just going around, oh, that's a nice color to be inspired by. That's a nice color, because the colors are so different there. And then I realized, no, there's something there with those photographs, and I think they could become, a lot of them could become paintings, and maybe even start to look for other little, kind of snippets like this on the right that could become a painting. Or on the left, isn't that amazing? Isn't that beautiful? It looks like, seaside Italy or something, the Amalfi Coast. It's really steeped into the mountain. It's like if everything in Batesville was on Ramsey Mountain, and I'm walking up and down that every day. And just a beautiful view. So the river itself is right here, and this is like the last street before the river, and it's built up into the downtown area. And this is old Velika Turnova, and kind of in the distance you can see the modern city, which has a couple 100,000 people, but this area here is much more historic, older, and a lot of buildings like this. Most of them used, some are abandoned. And that's me on the left, hard at work. Took that photo myself. Timer. Are you impressed? They needed something for PR. Take a picture of yourself in your studio. That's what I came up with. And then it's on the right here. This is an abandoned cathedral, Orthodox church. And someone said sometimes you can get in there. Once a year, they'll let people in. It's locked up. The Orthodox church still owns it. So I really wanted to see that. But I was also inspired by these passageways, and also thinking about culture changing, shifting, kind of going back and forth. So that ends up in the work as well, kind of abstractly. And it's interesting, the buildings that spoke to me actually ended up having, when I had this exhibition, people that lived there were saying that these were like some really interesting spots that I chose. Like this one in particular, this guy's older and he throws the best parties, like rave-like parties from like the 90s, and all the young kids go. But I had no idea, because I looked like, I don't know, a grandma lives there. It was like potted plants all over the place. You had no idea. Just kind of like a peek around the corner. And a lot of these passages, whether they were alleyways or actual bridges or just steps down, some of them were streets, but they were all they were all something that you could go from one place to another. And even the architecture itself seemed to be pointing the way, like a navigation through these spaces. It was easy to get lost, but you always, if you just kind of felt like I'm going to go up, I'll get back to the street that I was on. Or if you were trying to get to the river, if I keep just going down, even if it's winding and it's going away from where I want to go, it'll eventually get me in the right spot. So a lot of sense of like this connection. This was a writer that wrote a lot about when urban renewal was a kind of a new concept in New York in like the 40s and 50s, and she was very critical of it. But I love this idea. Cities need old buildings, right? And this is her famous quote: "Old ideas can sometimes use new buildings, but new ideas must use old buildings." The idea is that it's expensive to build new buildings. So who usually impacts a community when it's been abandoned, when it's been blighted? A lot of times it's creatives. A lot of times it's people that don't have the same kind of economic means, but they start a revival. They make, there's even sometimes squatting, which was happening in Bulgaria, which is still happening, that find an allure in the old and give it a new purpose, and then attracts people, then attracts economic. But if you start with the premise of this is blighted, this is no one's doing things here, and you want to start building new construction, it's too expensive to invest in, and it's harder to know if that's going to have the impact or not. So I was kind of thinking about that. You can see the distance here representing in a lot of these places were just really interesting. They seemed like figures. They seemed like portraits. They took on an identity of themselves. And part of them might even be like, 100 years old. Part of that same building is 800 years old. So they were walking, I was getting tours and they were walking me through and say, this dates to like the Ottoman Empire, but the second part of the building or the facade of the building is from the 19th century or from the 20th century or was just added on 20 years ago. And it's an Airbnb now. So it's really interesting collage-like building because there's limited space in this old historic neighborhood. Carly approved of this one, if anyone's wondering. She liked this one. She was also a little upset that I sold it when I was there, but that's kind of nice to sell something while you're there. But this was about a block from where I stayed. And I like this idea of like kind of an area that's neglected, but has a ton of potential. So there's like abandoned warehouse there. There's the residency is there. And it predated the modern Bulgarian nation that happened in the 20th century. It's a really old building. It's like 400 years old that I stayed in. It was amazing space. But there was just something about, it's also sort of timeless. It looks then and also now, and it looks like it could be in Memphis, Detroit, Batesville. Something caught me about the light. There's a lot of warm light there at night or even during the day. It's just really warm light. And I just thought, I'll sketch this and try to document this. And then it turned out to me like a finished piece. And just, you always, in this same area, you see a lot of changes, a lot of building, a lot of renovations. So this is the second series that I did while I was there, but it's kind of based on the first as well. So remember before I said my goal was kind of to work abstractly and to reference the changes in this area, but also kind of an allusion to the river, the Yantra River. And that's what Iatris is based on anyways. It's the Latin word for the Yantra River. And so I saw these as sort of structures or bridges or alleys, passageways, whether they were metaphoric or actual physical forms in this space. And you can kind of see them really in spaces like this, or even when you're looking out into spaces like that, or peeking around corners over the river. And, it references kind of the layering and the changes. It's based on the same series, though, because what I did is I used the same paint. So the first series really is not realistically, but in a way, much more naturalistically representing the city that I experienced and I saw. And I can't naively say, like, I know everything about the city or Bulgaria, but I was there and I was observing it from my perspective, visually, aesthetically, doing some research for the course of a month. And but this series also I used the same colors. So when I had paint on my palette left from working on a painting, I would then use that with acrylic. It dries so quickly that I sort of spread it across the surface and in a transparent way. So it was just layered and has that kind of provisional idea too, like it's in between. Is liminal too. It's like a lot of these spaces, like a bridge or a passageway is a liminal space. It's like, it's not here, it's not there. You see that as a corridor, as connecting, like I'm going to be there. I'm entering into something and I'm not there yet. And that's how these paintings felt for me too. I was kind of more of a metaphor, analogy of referencing that building or that bridge process, a change in a place over time. So this is passages number 2. These are all about the same size. I was also doing a lot of research when I was there. I was working on an article about Joseph Elbers at Black Mountain College. I'll get back into that a little bit, but it seemed like everything I was reading that had nothing to do with what I was working on related to Veliko Tarnova, even if it wasn't. So this was a book called The Beauty of Environment, and that a lot of times we think of the picturesque, like an ideal landscape as being beautiful, but oftentimes things like wabi-sabi, right? Like a Japanese aesthetic of things like kintsugi, something that's broken or well-worn, can actually, over time, deterioration, vintage, become beautiful. And we can appreciate that as an aesthetic as well. So I like this quote here where it's like, given enough time, everything that achieves a certain age will become to be approved of in culture. And I was getting a tour from my roommate that was also in the residency common, and he was saying, you notice this part of town looks a lot different? Do you notice this part of town looks a lot different than the other part of town? You see that? You know why that is? What's that? Don't do this. Oh, the microphone. That's a good point. Thanks, Carly. Soviet era, communist. There was like the most beautiful shades of gray is what Common said. That's what people said. The most beautiful shades of gray. All the color, that's gray. And this is kind of brutalist architecture. It's hated now in the Balkans. And even, there's amazing monuments. One that looks futuristic, like a UFO that landed in the Balkan Mountains, that is just a beautiful thing in a way that most people there wouldn't appreciate because it's like an eyesore. And that's the same idea with this here. So it's maybe like an outsider appreciates it. It could be in a museum, it could be in a book, but they're like, it reminds us of something else. And so a lot of these paintings are representing that idea. I may or may not have gotten into some of these abandoned buildings. This is Ivo on the right, and that's Galin on the left. I met him the very first night, and he is the owner of TAM. That's the event space. Every single night, I was like entertained almost. They would be like films, short films, bands would play, or a poetry reading. There was something going on like nearly every night. In Galin, they called him the unofficial mayor of Velika Tarnova and of Varusha South. He started a festival called Varusha South 48. So it's 48 hours nonstop of a festival. Concerts, music, art shows, tours, no sleeping for 2 days. It's like 200 things happen in 2 days. It's amazing. That's Galin. He started it. So I asked him when they bought the building. And it was a Turkish bath at one point. So it dates, the building he's in dates to the Ottoman Empire. The bottom part is this beautiful, you'll see it in my exhibition. Beautiful curving architecture. When did you guys buy the building? We never bought it. We're squatting. They've been there for 5 years. They begged the city after like 2 years to turn the power on because they were doing film fest there without power. They were piping it in from the next door neighbor. They had a bar and they used their bathrooms. So he's showing me the top floor there, which they have plans to do studios there. And so they said, what if we do it and show them the potential of it, and they see it as valuable, that all these people are coming here and spending money, then they can't say no. But if you ask for it, they'll say no. It's an interesting mindset that doesn't work as well over here. But he's the one who got me into the cathedral, legitimately, with a key from the Orthodox priest. And the word got out that Galin was going to take Dustyn to the cathedral to see it. So this has not been used for like 100 years and is literally falling apart. There are Byzantine era icons in there, just chilling. Like some of them are wrapped, but they're just there. There's like a Byzantine era carved, amazing chair that's in there. There's cement reinforcing it and metal that you can see. But the word got out that he was going to show me. So he's like, meet me there at 10 a.m. on Saturday. No, he said, meet me there at 10 a.m. on Friday. But then he changed it to Saturday, and he said, the coolest thing, it's like the great-great-grandson of the architect just happens to be in town at his cathedral. He wants to see it too. So it's going to be me, him, and the architect's whatever descendant. And then 30 people showed up, and they all wanted in too. But this is Ivo. This is Ivo and Jesse right there that did the Theater of No, the ripped and torn paintings. And while we were waiting for like an hour outside, they said, oh, we've seen what you've been doing, because they follow Iatris on Instagram. So they saw some of the things that I posted, the paintings I worked on. I showed them some examples on my phone. They're like, that's awesome. When is your exhibition? I'm not having one. I'm just gonna be here for a month. There's not even a goal in mind. I might make some paintings that they might not all turn out. And they said, this was 2 weeks into the residency. They said, why would you deprive us of that opportunity? But that's all they said. And then a week later, they said, hey, we were going to do studio visit exchanges. They were come see my studio. I was going to go see theirs. They said, come by tomorrow. I came by and I saw their mom. I saw Evo's mom's studio. She's a retired architect. She now does ceramics. And I saw Evo's studio. And they said, we kind of brought you here with ulterior motives. We want you to have an exhibition and we're going to plan it. Let us plan it. So then we'll start working on it. I was like, that's amazing. That means a lot to me. 2 days later, I get a text. I got a spot for you. Guess where it's at? TAM, that event space that kept me really entertained. So that was really cool that they did that and were able to put that together for me. So I'll show you some examples of that too. Passages, again, this is one of those. I think sometimes as an artist, you have a vulnerability where your work isn't working. You don't want to share it. You're not certain what it's going to be. And then there's times where it just sort of clicks and it kind of works. And so then towards the tail end of the residency, I was hitting my stride. I made a lot of these smaller ones, less than a dozen though. And I also wanted to scale them up and make them large. So I bought larger sheets of paper that are 2.5 feet by 3 feet. And I had to get a bigger portfolio to bring those home too on the plane. But I never finished those. So those are here that I can finish and pay homage to this series as well. I felt like these were a good start and could become something else as well. But you see that idea of passages. This is both sites within Veliko Turnova and inspired this series passages of those liminal spaces like this. I don't often show my references, but you can see the right became that painting that was just down the street from where I stayed. You can see it here. On the left, that painting using that palette, also working on the one on the right at the same time. So if I have a little bit of paint on my palette left, I can use that and spread that across the painting and just keep layering it. So I would mask off a section like the blue, let it dry, layer another. And I always did left to right, then right to left, so they kept crossing back and forth like a bridge, like a passageway. I mentioned I was also doing an article on Elbers at the same time, so I did a lot of research. I'm really good at researching, not so great at editing down, because I wrote I saw that. Time, we're coming up on time. I'll move a little quicker. So I kept making this article longer and longer and had a hard time making it shorter. But it was interesting because a lot of things that I was reading about Elbers related to both how I teach as an artist and my approach in the studio. So he was a fan of kind of the same concept that became Montessori model of learning by doing. John Rice and others, he started, and John Lewis, he started at the Bauhaus in Germany, but he emigrated to the United States when Hitler shut down the Bauhaus. And so he was at Black Mountain College, which was a really progressive school in just near Asheville, North Carolina, from 1933 to 1949. And in that time, he developed a lot of cutting edge things. He essentially treated it though like the liberal arts model and this idea of like experimentation, learning by doing. I also just want to mention just briefly about the levels of abstraction. I think oftentimes as an artist, I have to kind of defend abstraction. I don't know why I don't feel like landscape artists have to defend landscapes, or portrait artists don't have to like defend figurative art or portraiture. But this is kind of an interesting way to think about it. Like on the far left, that was one of the views that I painted while I was in Veliko Turnova. That was one of the passages that uses the same palette. So both in a way, they're both portraits of Veliko Turnova. One's a little more, physical in its representation, and the middle one's a little more metaphoric. And the last one was when there was just a little bit of paint left. I just kept painting on these panels over and over again. And in the end, I ended up making those marble panels after all that I was inspired by. But I left them, and this is just what they look like in progress. This is eventually, they just kept getting more and more patina on them, thin layers of glaze again and again, like my painting students are working with glazes, just a lot of layers. And I decided to leave these there. So this is at TAM, and I left this. They have this little kind of like, almost looks like a altar, this little niche there. And they were very flattered too. This was the night. So the last night that I was in Veliko Turnova at the residency. This was the pop-up exhibition. And Ivo and Jesse helped me to arrange this, but also to hang them. So we had to have this is that space I was telling you about. This used to be a Turkish bath here. You kind of see the curving of the walls there. So we came up with this idea of hanging them, suspending them like that, because it's only going to be up for one night. But it was awesome. And I didn't know if people would show up. It was raining. They advertised it, a few nights in advance. There was a DJ playing. That just gives you some street cred right there. A DJ's playing. It's a pretty cool thing. And a lot of the friends that I had made, like this is Stanislava and Yarlov here. She made sure that I was always busy too. She would say, hey, there's a wine tasting this weekend. You want to go? Sure, that sounds amazing. I love wine. That's great. And then Martina would reach out to me and say, hey, Dustyn, do you have anything going on this weekend? I heard there's a wine tasting in Velika Tarnova. You might want to go. I'm like, I'm already going. Someone invited me. She's like, how did you already know about that? But so friends that I made there that were awesome, really made sure that they would check in on me. They make sure, hey, what you've been up to? You got anything going on? If not, and you can see how happy I am at the tail end of that, right? Like that was me just feeling like that was such an amazing experience. And then this is coming back. I'll just end on this. This is finishing this series of dwellings. And I just wanted to mention what, for me, dwellings meant as kind of a journey. This is one of my inspos. This is René Magritte, who is a surrealist artist. I love this. It's like his house at night, but the sky is during the day. He explored the idea of the uncanny and the unconscious mind. And there's kind of a sense of the sublime. This is our neighbor's house. It's catty corner. This was just one evening stroll. I just took some photos. I was inspired by the light. Kind of lived with them. It was about a year ago exactly today, and right before Thanksgiving. And I took all these photos late at night. Just kind of showed them to Aiden and Erica and Carly, and they're like, "Cool, a bunch of blurry photos at night. A dirty lens. That's great." But something really stuck with me about those scenes, and I just felt like I had to paint them, which is kind of weird because I'm mostly an abstract artist. I'm like, I've got to paint that. But some of those same ideas of building in between stages, right? And transient and changing and shifting. I showed this to my neighbor. He's like, I got to go paint my house now. And then within a week, there's ladders and they are painting. I was like, I'm not going to repaint it. No, I already did it. And kind of what's inside is what's outside also. So me, for the word dwellings, I was kind of thinking about it can reference a boundary, a house, a dwelling, something you dwell in. But maybe some of you are like me, have a bit of anxiety. I can dwell on something, whether it's positive or negative, something that was said. Did I say something wrong? Does someone hate me? Are they going to like this, not like this? We can dwell in that, right? So it's a psychological portrait of the inhabitant. And all of these paintings don't have a figure in them. There's no figure, but there's still a sense of a presence in that void, the glow of the house. Who's inside? What's happening? You never know. It's sort of an identity. It's a portrait without actually showing the person. So that's kind of where I ended up, and I showed you where I started from, and I'll end there. Thank you for being a great audience.
Dustyn, I know that a few years ago you were interested in tiny houses, and I wonder if, one way or another you're connected with dwellings. If you even know that.
Yeah, definitely with my studio that I'm building in the backyard, because that's every tiny house is 300 square feet or smaller, and that's 20 by 10, so it's 200 square feet. And I put a loft in it, so it could be like an ornamentum that you could sleep in. The loft is like the size of a full-size bed. I think I've always been interested in just unusual ways of inhabiting a space too. I love the idea of a tiny house and an economy space, but I have a lot of collections. I don't think I could fit in a tiny house like comfortably. Kudos to those who can though. Other questions?
Okay, two questions.
Yeah.
I know that you showed the Magritte, that's a great influence. I was wondering if you, like in the history of European painting, especially thinking of Bulgaria, like not that close by, but thinking about Austria, like even Chile had these amazing like landscapes of houses. So did those at all like influence what you do, or maybe Jean Buffet in France, like had this amazing like.
I love Duvet. When I'm thinking about space, too, it's like spaces that have been demarcated. So it's not just the expansive landscape, which is interesting because recently I did do this. If you're wondering, like, what's next? I made this like a recreation of this house, but I did a tiny quest at a farm, and I did a painting of a farm. I kind of think of that as the landscape too. Like, the main show is the building, but like a supporting character in the landscape. Like, it's a great painting these from a photograph for me. Like, I print the photograph up, I don't use it on my phone, and I draw them by hand. I don't transfer the image. For me, it's just like really seeing, only noticing what I can observe as opposed to like blowing it up and looking up close. Or I'm not interested in doing like plein air painting or anything, but it's a really great way to see like the phenomenon of like how light is in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too about landscapes and the tradition in Bulgaria. So I was talking to someone from Ukraine. There's a lot of Ukrainian refugees, political asylum in Bulgaria. So I met quite a few, and I met this great artist. His name is Fadir, and he was talking about in Bulgaria, in schools there, but also in the Ukraine, when there was a communist influence, abstraction was championed, but figurative art was penalized. And so he had a professor that said in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, painting abstractly will save your life. Painting figuratively could literally kill you. And then the way they tackled it was like social realism was popular. So social realism was a way to be, isn't it ironic they were trying to break the conventions of abstraction, which in most places would have been avant-garde and discouraged. And there it was championed because they sort of saw that as their, so then when social realism became popular, that was their way of painting houses and architecture and saying it's social realism. And is that the exact thing swapped then when it changed, and there was that kind of freedom, you could paint anything, it's like, but figurative will save your life now. I thought it was really interesting when I was talking to figurative. Oh,
No, well, first of all, I was really interested, really impressed. So, in this research of space, what I really liked is that you really seem interested in all possible length scales, right? Because sometimes, there is a landscape, or then a piece of landscape, then a single building, but then you zoom in with elements like window, door, but then even more in the details of the textures of the materials. So this also gives an idea to me of movement, like an eye that is always moving from different length scales. Is that it would be fair to say that this research is a kind of an artistic microscope on different length scales?
Yeah, well, this was what I did too. This was the start of this wacky idea that I had, like, I'm gonna paint a 2x4. Why? I don't know, but it was this idea that I had. You've heard this before. I cast a 2x4 in plaster, and then so it's just white, and then I painted it just to look just like the 2x4. It's kind of a dumb thing. It's like a 2x4 costs like a couple dollars to buy, but now like I'm gonna ask someone to buy this for like hundreds of dollars or something. But yeah, that's a fake 2x4 that I painted. So yeah, I'm very much interested in zooming in, but also like the motif. Like in art, a lot of times we think about the motif. Like here's the subject matter, here's the frame, and we're looking through a window. But what's the motif? What's the smallest element that you can break it down to? So if you're thinking about a pattern, you take a motif, and you know. So what is the kind of what's inside of the house? That's forming the house. What's inside of us? It's forming us, our identity. So the house really becomes a proxy for that familiarity and that expressiveness and the psychological aspect of, inside versus outside. So 2x4 is the structure or the support, and the outside is what we see. So I'm breaking it down. It doesn't always work though. Like I said, like that one painting looked like a bad, dirty sponge. It doesn't always make the most visually interesting. But when you see it side by side and like have a chance to tell it, like sometimes when it's like, I don't get it, it's just a white painting. Like maybe you've been to a museum before and you're like, oh my gosh, they're messing with me. Like, is this even art? But let me leave you with this thought, these words of wisdom. Do you ever listen to a song and hate it and say, was that even a song? No, it's not a song. You maybe don't like it, but when you have a heart for some reason, you see a painting and you're like, I don't get it. What does it mean? That's hideous. Anyone could do that. Good. That's awesome. But they did it. And so is it art? Yeah, it's still art, just like that song you didn't like is still a song. All right, get out of here, go back out candy. Have a good time. Happy holidays, everybody.